Welcome to the weekly takeaway, what you need to know from the news. And today we're going to jump into some topics that could probably all be summarized with one word. Maybe it's two words. I haven't figured out if there's a hyphen in there or not. The word or words is this: coronavirus. Is that one word? Is that two words? We don't know, but we know it's bad, and a lot of people have been impacted by it, certainly. When this whole thing started, the first time I heard the phrase coronavirus, COVID-19, when we started to talk about Wuhan, China, somewhere that no one had ever heard about before, we started to talk about all these things. I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about this one time. We'll deal with this issue once, and then we'll move on. Boy, was I wrong. Now, this is all we talk about all of the time. You're probably overwhelmed with coronavirus news, but we're going to do our best to cut through some of that today and find a takeaway, because in all of that news, the swamp that is the overwhelming information about this thing we're all living through right now, there are some takeaways, and we want to get to those. And in summary, we're going to talk about a $2.2 trillion stimulus package. We're going to talk about yet another investigation by Adam Schiff, the most famous, non-famous, infamous man in America, as he tries once again to undermine the President of the United States. Meanwhile, and we'll discuss this as well, the President is working with supply chains, trying to get to our healthcare professionals exactly what they need. We're going to cover all of those, but probably the most important story we'll get to today, and hang with us, is the fact that because of the coronavirus, we are suffering from a chicken wing glut in the United States. Too many chicken wings. We don't know what to do with them. We'll talk about that as well. So let's start at the top. And whether this is the most important story or the least important story depends on where you happen to be sitting right now. If you're working, maybe not as important. If you're a small business owner, much more important. But this last week, we know that a $2.2 trillion stimulus package called the CARES Act finally made it through both the Senate in the House, a little bit upside down as we are accustomed to understanding these things. But the Senate passed a bill, the House then passed it, the President signed it. And an interesting piece that has put conservatives and liberals, both of them, in an interesting spot as they talk about this. Whether you are for government spending or against government spending, you might have a different opinion about this act. What we know is that a lot of families across the country are struggling to figure out how to make ends meet, how to pay their bills, and what all of that will look like going into the future. We don't know how long this situation will last. We don't know what decisions those who are responsible for these things will make that will impact our lives. We know that the President has given a timeline when he expects the country to get back to work. But that doesn't mean the governors are going to follow that timeline. It doesn't mean local officials, mayors, and so forth will follow that timeline. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know what the future holds, and the economic impact of all of this will be, and already has been, tremendous. There are small business owners hanging on, hoping that they'll get to the other side of this. And in response to all of that, the government passed this spending bill that is intended to not only stimulate the economy, but less stimulate and more maintain the economy. We're at an interesting time in history where the government has told most businesses they want them to stop operating, and most workers, most business people, and those who support these businesses to stay at home. What a crazy time. Who would have thought that would happen? In response to that, unemployment has skyrocketed, the largest unemployment numbers in history. It's crazy. And so we have this stimulus package, and I think most people would agree that this is a good thing, that if there is a way to help families and businesses get from this side of this thing to the side where we're functioning again as we should be, that it's good. The one question we don't have an answer to is how long will it last? And the answer to that question will really, from a historical perspective, looking back, determine whether or not this was a good thing or a bad thing. But if we can get to the other side of this in short order, it will have been a good thing, and Americans will continue working. $2.2 trillion. Can you imagine that? And this may not be the end. We'll see. Meanwhile, Adam Schiff, that's right, you know him, Adam Schiff, has decided that he will launch another investigation into the president, because the other investigations he has launched and overseen, the impeachment process that he was largely responsible for, all of those things fell flat. None of them have gotten any traction. So he's going to try to blame something else on the president. And this something else is a global pandemic. Apparently, it is the Democratic Party's goal to criminalize policy that they don't like. Now think about that for a second. They don't like the policies of the sitting president, and so because they don't like the policy, the way he handles various things, whether it's in Ukraine or Russia or now with the global health pandemic, because they don't like the decisions that he's made or the leadership that he's exhibited or the lack thereof in their opinion or from their perspective, because they don't like what he's doing, they're going to try to criminalize his behavior. And this has been the road that they've run down again and again and again, and Schiff apparently is their guy. Now, how he inherited the job of pursuing the criminalization of everything the president has done, I don't know, but he's the guy. Now again, this is an interesting precedent to set as we look down the road. If it is possible to criminalize the decisions, the non-criminal decisions of the sitting president, if he is able to pull this off, which up to this point he has not been able to, but if he is able to pull this off, what does that mean going forward? We understand that the party in power right now largely is the Republican Party, and so we look at the Democrats and say, well, this is what they're doing. But if they pull it off, make no mistake that it doesn't matter which party is in power, they will always go after a president that they don't like for decisions that are made. Now, I believe that we'll look back on this moment that we're sitting in and we'll conclude that some things could have been done different. But I wonder what you would do if you were the president of the United States right now, and you're probably screaming, I would do this, 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 and this. We all have opinions. We all know exactly what we would do. And yet most of us can't get off our couch and haven't showered in 3 days. So there you have it. Meanwhile, the president and his team are trying to figure out exactly what it is they should do. And whether you agree with them or not, I think we could all agree that there's a tremendous amount of pressure to make the right decision, and it's in no one's best interest, least of all the president's, to see thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans die while millions more lose their job because of this global health crisis. It's in no one's best interest. And yet the Democratic Party will do their very best to criminalize the decision-making process of the president. Apparently, he should have known, even though no one else on the planet has been able to figure it out, when this started, how it started, who started it, and what the net impact will be. So, Adam Schiff, thank you for spending money we don't have on an investigation we don't need to come to a conclusion that has already been concluded. We continue, though, and meanwhile, the president stays busy and continues to work. As you know, again, if you've been watching this unfold, one of the big questions has been, how can we get the equipment to the people that need it? The equipment that they need. They need masks and they need other protective gear and they need machines that can help them do their job. We're talking about healthcare professionals and others throughout the industry that are trying to not only keep those of us safe who aren't infected, but to help those who are. How do we mobilize the supply chains to get what we need? The president has been fighting this fight on many fronts, and the most recent one is his dealing through social media, of course, with 3M. 3M is the largest maker of the masks that are needed to protect the healthcare workers and the first responders that are dealing with so much of what we see around us. And apparently 3M has decided that if you pay cash, even if you're in another country, that you're a better customer than those who reside in your own country. This was recently brought to light by the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Now, this is interesting. An entity, a government entity in a state that has money and is trying to buy equipment from a company like 3M, an American company, they could not get an audience with anyone at 3M that would sell them the equipment they needed directly. So they did what the president has done. They took a sheet out of his playbook and they went to Twitter. Now, who would have thought Twitter would be a tool used to change the world, but it has, for good and evil. But the Florida Division of Emergency Management went to Twitter and they helped others understand what was happening, that 3M would not even respond to their calls to purchase equipment. That was picked up. It became a public story, and we learned along the way that not only would they not sell to Florida, but they were inflating their costs. All of this has become public, and so the president then responded on Twitter, because apparently that's the way we do things. And he has called for 3M to stop selling masks to anyone outside of the United States. We'll see what happens there, but it's amazing how many fronts the war that we're currently involved in is happening. And the president and his administration and those professionals that he works with really trying to work through this. There is so much in those three stories, but there are some very, very important takeaways. One of the big takeaways for me as I've been watching this unfold is this one. I think that we need to be very discerning. I say all the time we need to get beneath the headlines and beneath the stories as they're presented to us. We need to be discerning listeners and discerning consumers of the news. Absolutely, no question. We must view everything with a skeptical eye. But at the same time, I think we need to give the benefit of the doubt when the benefit of the doubt can be given. The reason everything in our country becomes so politicized is because we're so quick to say, well, if I'm not on their side, then what they're doing must be wrong. There was a moment when this crisis began to unfold where it appeared for a moment that the party lines had become so blurred that we were all working together toward a common end. Here's how I know things are getting better. People are fighting again. That's how you know. In my home, when my kids are fighting, I know that everything else must be okay because they're not worried about anything. They're fighting with each other. That's how you know. And that's where we are. And we need to be very careful as we look for someone to blame or as we push back on someone that may not be of our party. We need to be very careful not to assign some sinister motive to their actions. Have a discerning eye, but be very careful to understand those things as they are. Here's what else I know, that the best information that the professionals are providing to us is muddy at best. Be very careful with the data, with the information that is being pushed to you. And again, be discerning and give those who are professionals, those who have spent their lives studying these things, the benefit of the doubt until they take that benefit of doubt away from you. I would also identify as a takeaway, one that has helped me, that we're all in this together. Now, we would never hope that all of us would go through a crisis together. But there's something comforting about knowing we're all in this together, that the best and the brightest among us and everyone from that place down are trying to figure out how to move forward in a meaningful way. This $2.2 trillion of stimulus has been pushed to small businesses, but I've been very encouraged to see how small businesses and individuals have responded. There was a moment where everyone was very confused, but along the way, we figured out how to make it work and are continuing because we have that American spirit to move forward. And although people like Adam Schiff would do their best to jump in the middle of it and say we're not doing our best and we're not doing all that we can, Americans understand that if we move forward together, we'll get to the other side, even of a global crisis. Other stories in the news, and these are the unexpected side effects. You are never quite sure exactly how one event will impact other things, but there are some unexpected side effects of the coronavirus, some good and some bad. The chicken wings glut, I'm not sure where you fall on that. Maybe you think that's a good thing, maybe you think it's a bad thing. But apparently, because restaurants are no longer operating the way they once did, where people are sitting there and eating until they fall on the floor, they're not selling as many chicken wings as they once did. And so the chicken wings exist, and yet they have not been packaged in a way that we can get them and consume them. I'm sure because of American innovation, we'll figure that out too. But at the moment, we have more chicken wings than we could possibly eat, and this is good news for anyone who can get to the store and buy those up. Do yourself a favor. Buy some chicken wings. Also, unexpected side effect of the coronavirus. March was the highest month in history for firearms purchases, at least in the last 20 years. There's a lot of data we're not quite clear on, but in the last 20 years, we know this was the highest month for firearm purchases. 3.7 million background checks by the FBI. 2.4 of those were for gun sales specifically, and that is an incredible number. Again, I think this is one of the good side effects. For the first time in a very long time, common Americans who have been told that you can buy a gun in any store at any time for any reason are finally understanding that that's not the case. It's also been interesting as we've gone through this moment of crisis that with that many guns coming off of the shelves and that many people buying ammunition and guns, that we're not seeing mass shootings. Maybe guns aren't the problem. Maybe it's the criminals that are the problem. And maybe when law-abiding citizens go through the right process to get what is protected by the Constitution, things are okay. Interesting side effect and a great takeaway. Zoom meetings are another unexpected side effect. People certainly were doing Zoom meetings before this, and some people live their life by Zoom meeting, but the average citizen probably had no idea what that was until about 3 weeks ago. Even my children now are saying things like, maybe we can meet with our friends over Zoom. Maybe we can have a Zoom with them. Maybe a Zoom meeting. The whole world now knows what Zoom meetings are. If only we had all bought stock in Zoom. And then finally, and this may be, I don't know, the largest side effect, the most important side effect, Tiger King. You know you've watched it. The whole world is watching Tiger King, and that just speaks to where we are and how bored we are. Meanwhile, and this is your last story for the day, great story. I like to end on a high note. Not a coronavirus story, although it happened in New York. A beagle named Zeke survived a 40-mile drive while stuck under his owner's vehicle, as if things aren't bad enough. The state of New York struggling with coronavirus, as you know. A beagle who probably had no idea that anything else was going on decided he would get up under his owner's car, and his owner didn't realize it for 40 miles. But that beagle survived. He was extracted from that vehicle with the help of staff members from the Lollipop Farm. That's right, Lollipop Farm, the Humane Society of Rochester, New York, and it all turned out just fine for Zeke. A lot of things going on in the world. Some good, some bad, some we're not quite sure about. But understand this, there is always hope. We'll always get through it, and eventually we'll find ourselves on the other side. Tons of information being pushed at you. Cut through it, figure out what's true, what's not true, give the benefit of the doubt where the benefit of the doubt is warranted, and keep your head up. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend.